Well, what are some actions people could take on a smaller level then? For instance, locally, do you see any solutions in that avenue?
Some of the solutions I could give, unfortunately, cost money. So if I had a magic wand, I would tell every one of your viewers and my viewers to get a full water filtration system in your home. But we're talking thousands of dollars. So again, there are solutions that could help, but this is America, so you need the green to do it. But in the short term, I think people really, really need to look into independently testing their water, because that's a whole nother scheme, Ron, that I'm sure we don't have time to talk about. I mean, the water testing in most of these communities is rigged. I'm not trying to sound conspiratorial, but I've seen it. I mean, from Flint to other places, they throw out high tests to try and lower the average. They manipulate the testing, meaning they let water run like right before they test to get, when you it's called flushing. When you let the water run before testing, it gives time for lead and other heavy metals to be flushed out. Then you put the sample bottle in. Voila, you have levels that are, quote, meeting EPA regulations. So people need to look into independent testing in their area, which also could cost money. So there's a lot of things: independent testing, water filtration systems. And honestly, to me, it goes to the wider discussion of what is the left doing in this country right now. But people need to organize to demand these things put into legislation. Water testing, across the board, but not not your local town doing it, not your state environmental departments doing, because I have seen they cheat. They cheat. Let me tell you something. If the media, for example, has just reported that Flint's water is now meeting EPA regulations based on testing that have been done with people who do business with the EPA, with people who do business with the state of Michigan. There's basic conflicts of interest. And if a journalist actually looks into their studies, which I have, they're based on like 50 homes that they've tested. They don't even confirm whether the homes actually have lead service lines, which, if you're looking for lead, you'd want to make sure those homes actually have lead service lines. There's a lot of basically like these studies aren't worth the paper they're written on, but the agencies put it out and then the media just reports the top line headline: Flint meeting EPA regulations. I could tell you, because I've been to Flint 17 times. Let me repeat, 17 times since 2016. That, I mean, all you got to do is be there for an hour, talk to a bunch of people, go into people's homes. You'll quickly realize the water is not safe across the board. And by the way, that's another. I'm hitting you with a lot, but there's another element here. Cities like Flint, at its peak, had 250 to 300,000 residents in its heyday. Right now, it has under 100,000. So when you have cities whose water system and the pipes were meant for a lot more people that currently live there, there's a lot of abandoned homes in Flint, Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, a lot of these cities, a lot of abandoned homes. So water is not moving. It's stagnant, which also causes contamination problems. So I would tell people, look in your area for an independent tester. Erin Brockovich has put out information, on her website and Facebook about, good sources for independent testing. I would also look in, if you could swing it, to full filtration systems in your home. I would also look into what are they adding into your water. Where I live, I looked, they're adding ammonia into the water, which is not good. And they add these other chemicals because half of these water utilities don't know what the hell they're doing. So, yeah, my homework would be look online. There are water reports for your local town, city, borough, whatever. What are they adding?
What's a good resource for that? Like, what's a good resource to see a water report for your town?
You could just, like, wherever you live, just Google,
Okay.
If it's LA water utility reports, you should, something should come up right away. I could send you something if you want to put it in the description too.
Okay, great. Yeah.
But I'm telling you that, people made it seem like the EPA suddenly became corrupt under Trump. The EPA was corrupt long before Donald Trump. And the EPA, I mean, there have been whistleblowers that come out that have said the EPA has helped cities and towns cover up what's truly in their water, which is part of what happened in Flint. The EPA knew there was a problem in Flint long before it went public, and they didn't step in to stop it. So, I mean, ultimately the blame lies with Rick Snyder and the state, but the EPA is just like the rest of the government. They're at the mercy of corporations. So if Dow Chemical, DuPont, you know, paint companies, auto, steel, fracking, we haven't even gotten into, you know, fracking uses a lot of water. And then that waste from fracking goes back into your water streams. So I don't want to scare people, but it's really the wild, wild west out there. And I unfortunately think, although Biden and Harris are talking a good game as far as replacing lead service lines, that's a good 50% of the problem. It doesn't address the other half.
I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you knew that about, but I'm from Pittsburgh,
Yep.
and I grew up there. And
The heart of
huh?
Pittsburgh. You're the heart of Pittsburgh.
But like I went to grad school there too. I grew up there and then I left and then I came back for grad school. And I went to a panel in grad school on campus, and there was somebody representing the industry. It was a panel on fracking. There was an industry representative. There were a couple academics. Some were more, I guess, I don't know if you could call anyone pro fracking per se, but some were more fracking sympathetic than others. And then one of the guys was total environmentalist. That was the guy that I liked, and I still remember what he said. This was a long time ago, but he said, "You know, I grew up in New Orleans, where we really like Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and one of the things we would do is parking is a nightmare during Mardi Gras. So what you would do with your buddies is you would load up in a car and get a bunch of you per car, and you would just kind of park illegally, and you would get a $35 parking ticket, and you would just split that however many ways, and you would just pay a few bucks, and that was just kind of the cost of having a good time on Mardi Gras, and no one really cared." I just described the EPA to you and their relationship to these corporations who are destroying our country. Like you said, the EPA, like what they actually enforce, it's just kind of like, shrug. It's, well, yeah, it's $5.
Listen, when I was at the Young Turks, I covered a story in North Carolina that there was a Teflon factory that manufactured, you know, non-stick cookware and a lot of those kind of products that had been dumping cancerous byproducts in a river that serves 500,000 people basically since the 1970s. The EPA knew about it. They didn't do anything. I mean, there's examples of that all over the country. Oregon, I mean, pretty much any state you live in, even ones that you would think like California and New York, that traditionally the reputation is good water. You know, there are parts of every state that have water problems, and a lot of it is caused by industry and contamination. And honestly, I mean, what really do you expect when, you know, all these companies have an army of lobbyists that are essentially bribing the politicians and the agencies that are supposed to regulate them? I mean, like a problem I always had with Elizabeth Warren, other than the selfies, was she thought we could just like regulate our way out of everything. Well, the problem is, even when you have regulatory agencies, if the government is rotten, if it's bought off, they're not going to do anything. Like technically, there was a regulatory agency that was supposed to be regulating Wall Street. They were not doing so, and that's why we had a financial crash, which was obvious that it was coming if you had a regulatory agency actually paying attention that was not handcuffed. I mean, the same thing, FEC. We have regulatory agencies, they're just frozen because they're bribed. So at the end of the day, yeah, the EPA, I mean, I don't want to say it's all bad. There are good people that I've spoken with that work there. But if, you know, off the record, they'll tell you, yeah, I mean, from the top, they do the bare minimum and it's all surface level stuff because, you know, essentially you're regulating your bosses and the donors are the bosses. And in Flint, I mean, for example, I saw Politico, for example, did a piece a few months ago or weeks ago saying Flint has clean water. So why don't the people trust it? And I spoke with people in Flint who were just like, literally, the people in Flint told Politico for that story, the water is not clean. And Politico just did a headline, the water in Clint is safe. Why don't the people trust it? Again, pointing
Because they're using it. That's
right,
why.
right. Pointing to a study that was based on like 70 homes. And the author of the study had financial relationships with the state of Michigan. So it's all very, very corrupt. And unfortunately, I mean, at the end of the day, Harris is right about one thing, that clip you showed. I mean, at least she's acknowledging we fought war for oil, but if people actually watch CNBC or know anything about the top moving stocks, there's a reason hedge funders in New York, Connecticut, the Northeast, where Wall Street is concentrated, why the water has been purchased over the years at a skyrocketing rate. It's one of the fastest moving commodities that is being bought by hedge funders because there's going to be a shortage and they realize it. So yeah, it's really scary. And the best thing I could tell people, particularly Sunrise Movement, who has actually like accomplished something. I mean, they actually have an organizing structure, so credit to them. Add water to your list of things that need changing. Because again, with Flint, for example, lead got the headline, but it wasn't just lead. It was bacteria, Legionnaire's disease, which killed, according to the state, 12 people. But anyone who looked at it, you're talking possibly hundreds of people died of Legionnaire's, but it was wrongly diagnosed as simple pneumonia. PFAS, again, those cancer-causing carcinogens that come from the manufacturing of non-stick cookware. I mean, there's a lot of other toxins, chromium, aluminum, arsenic, that were found in that water. But the thing is, the EPA doesn't even test for the wide spectrum of bacteria and carcinogens. They generally test for lead, copper, a couple other heavy metals, and call it a day. And it's not a coincidence, by the way. Look at Flint, look at Detroit, look at Milwaukee, look at Cleveland, look at parts of North Carolina, look at parts of the Ohio River Valley, which there was a movie about this. I think Mark Ruffalo was in it, if I'm wrong, about the Ohio River Valley. It was DuPont, I believe, that, I mean, animals were dying from drinking the water, and people were getting cancers at high rates. Look at all these cities, and they all have one thing in common: high cancer rates, high levels of kidney failure, liver disease, reproductive problems in women. So, and then look at their pipes. There's a cause and effect here.
Oh, well, this is terrifying. If only whiskey quenched my thirst, I'd feel a little better.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news